Hello, everyone, and welcome to Making the Rounds, the show where this time I actually told Emily ahead of time that we are going live, so we don't get any strange swearing or reactions this time. I know that's everyone's favorite part, so please take pity on us. And anyway, it's been a while, but we're hoping that you didn't notice we were gone, just like the LCS hopes that you didn't notice we were gone.
That's
And
great.
that literally never works out. We actually did lose YouTube subscribers
I'm
during the
sorry.
interim. You know, it's mostly because I'm gonna be honest though. I think that has more to do with me loading YouTube shorts of me streaming at MF wigs and cackling. So, than actually
She's
not doing a
like,
show. So,
uh, well, yeah, I'll just say I won't open up too much about personal issues, but basically I was home visiting my family because my mom's sick, so I want to spend as much time with her as possible. That is why I was not on the show. So
everyone, well wishes to Emily's family, and in particular her mom. So glad that you're back, even if you'd rather be hanging out with your mom. Generally speaking, I would rather be hanging out with my mom most of the time. So there you go. We've got that going for us. I think the fun thing that we're opening with this time is Tradle, because as many of you may know, I am transitioning into Pro Tradle and away from League of Legends. It's not remotely lucrative, but we'll see anyway.
the pro scene,
I don't think there is one, but anyway, for those of you who don't know, Tradle is a daily thing where you have to guess what the country is based on its export composition. So it only shows goods; it doesn't show services. So don't expect services, but there could sometimes be clues for services. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Tradle. And Emily, you can go ahead and take the first guess
let's see. Let me pull up the
when it
stream.
shows up on the stream. So I'm going to
Yeah.
give you a little bit more information on this one because you can't necessarily mouse over it. I mean, you can open it on your
Boop.
browser. It'll be the same for you, but it's basically we've got some recreational boats, scrap vessels, other floating structures, cars, delivery trucks. We've got some video displays, rubber working machinery, video recording equipment, office machinery parts, transmissioners, air conditioners, electronic parts. We've got some pesticides, sodium, antioxidants. We've got fish oil, so we've got a lot of fish. It's just
A lot of fish. It's
a
a very
lot
heavy
of
fish
a lot of
composition.
fish, and some petroleum and some recreational boats. Uh, we've got some instruments, vegetable products, textiles. So basically, breaking this down, I'm going to paint a picture of what this is. It's probably an island. It's probably a relatively small island, 1.15 billion. All right. It's probably like less developed, but maybe a former colony. So that's kind of like given the fact that there's some advanced machinery and stuff being developed. A lot of tourism, probably, considering the amount of recreational boats. I think there's also, yeah. So I moused over.
Other
Paper
floating
goods.
structures.
This has
Yeah.
printed material, calendar titles, pamphlets, things like that. So I'm guessing tourism, even though we can't like necessarily capture tourism as a service. I am a very pathetic person, so I have a guess. But if you would like to go first, I have a guess I'm pretty confident in. But if you would like to go
You do?
first, yeah, I
I
do.
would actually really. So I had two guesses. So I feel like they're both bad.
Okay, go for it.
No, never mind. I feel like so I was gonna guess either Iceland or Denmark.
Both of those will export a lot more than 1.15
Yeah,
billion.
but yeah, now that it's just only 1.1 1.15 billion.
They would also export a lot more advanced materials and a lot less refined petroleum.
What do you got?
Okay, so I may or may not have been looking up like Southeast Asia and Indian Ocean area islands recently to impress my viewers on Tradle because I'm not pathetic. Also because I just like to research international trade and like the global sphere, and I've been reading a lot of books on why things like this is, which is why we probably play a lot of Tradle on my stream. But I am confident I can one-shot this because I am this fucking sad. Alright. We're gonna send Seychelles. I probably can't even pronounce it, but by God, I know they have a lot of tourism and a lot of fish. Hooray! I actually...
Oh my god.
Anyway, that's Tradle. Oh wait,
That's amazing.
the stream didn't even see me get it correct, so now they think it's fabricated. But here, I will show it. Congratulations, Tradle 865 puzzle. Seychelles 100%. First guess. Hooray. The reason why I know this is because, like I said, I was looking up Comoros as well. Various other islands like around Madagascar recently. And I know they had a lot of fish and they had a lot of trade, and most like countries around that area of Africa will have refined petroleum. So yeah. They're also a former colony, obviously. So good times. Yeah. Anyway, Tradle is done now, guys. For those of you who have no idea what this was, now you can either be impressed or disturbed by my Tradle prowess. I'm going pro. I'm gonna start a pro scene. Let's continue on and actually talk about League of Legends, because
League of Legends.
That's what we're here for. So LCS is back. What kind of fun? Oh yeah.
Discord
likes LCS.
Discord's also excited about LCS being back.
Yes. So what kind? I wanted to ask, like, do you feel like there was a better use of break time by LCS teams and the product than last time?
I would say yes, but the bar is like pretty low. So here's the thing. I think I was there when we were coming up with the show match concept. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really cool. I hope pros had fun. I know I had fun from what I could watch, which honestly, unfortunately, wasn't a lot because I was driving back from visiting other family in Connecticut at the time. But I think the big miss for me, as it is for like a lot of these things, is promotion and trying to like get the word out there. I feel like I saw more promotion for Flowers' 4th of July, and that's because he's doing it himself, right? Yep. And like he's enlisting like a bunch of us who are participating and all that stuff to, not that I didn't like retweet the LCS stuff, but I didn't know the exact timing or when it was going live and that kind of thing from my end. So and obviously I'm not going to promote something kind of before they promote it themselves. I don't even think I'm allowed to. So I think that is always where we kind of, and I'm not saying anything here, by the way, that I didn't say in meetings yesterday in terms of like, we need to promote this better. Mm-hmm. But that's always where these kind of things like falter for me. I also felt the same way, even though they ended up promoting it really heavily, I think like two days out, and then like teasing it a bit. As in they were doing something with the FlyQuest games that they did last time, which I also thought were really cool. And like I watched those and the viewer experience was very fun. The viewer experience of Flower stuff was also very fun. And then the viewer experience of the LCS, from what I could see, was was really fun. They were like very funny games. And I feel like you could literally, even though it's like boiling the picks or whatever, you could just advertise it as like, hey, we're gonna see Teemo versus Teemo bot. And like people will tune into that. And I know the when they tracked the, like, they started really, really low and then it grew like really steadily, which kind of always happens with streams typically, is you will get, if it's like not game dependent, you'll get your peak a little bit more gradually about like an hour or two in, I think. So that is always my frustration with these, is not like the execution of the thing, because I'm glad we got so many pros. I know they filmed a lot of stuff that day too, like a swarm thing that just came out today. I'm pretty sure they filmed pros that day, and that content was really cool. And a lot of that's being used as a lead-in to this weekend, which I don't mind. But I think the show match itself, definitely we could have started promoting that like way earlier. And it would have served it a lot better, because the content in and of itself was funny. So that's always my frustration, is like, how are you using this time off to keep people invested in LCS as a product and like the players? And I think the actual show match does that. I think pros does that. But I think that advertising and placement of these things is never as good as it could be.
Yeah, I know, like, a lot of it, because I said this last time, where suddenly there's this period of 2 weeks where nothing's happening, and a lot of times, like, almost everyone related to the pro scene will take a break. Like, someone will take a break because there are so few breaks. So that will include like the marketers, the advertisers, etc. So a lot of people will take a break during this period. So I understand that like a lot of efforts and a lot of things like this will be scaled back. And there's probably a lot of laws and ethical reasons why they wouldn't hire contractors. Also money reasons why they wouldn't hire additional contractors just for this event. So I also get that, like, very much. Like, I'm gonna be really honest, I didn't watch any of the fun stuff, mostly because I sleep during the day. During these times, but I was aware it was happening, except for the LCS show match. I feel like I only saw that when it was happening. I know that you said it was advertised like 2 days in advance, but I didn't see it. That doesn't mean it didn't.
About the fly, I was talking about the fly.
Oh, the
thing.
fly.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, this one I saw like same day.
Yeah.
Like I don't even. And so, again, like you, I was kind of out of it because I was visiting my family, and I actually was focusing on that. But like, I didn't see any promotion.
Yeah. The fly quest thing was promoted. Yeah, that one I saw. I did not see the LCS thing promoted until it was happening, which felt a lot like what happened last break when you suddenly had Flowers and Kobe co-streaming Academy, which was also like a rushed thing. I don't know. It just, this one obviously had a lot more planning to it than that one did, so that was good, and it seemed like a fun event. And it was probably really cool. I didn't watch it. Source, I didn't watch it. But I did not see it advertised anywhere, so it's like hard to say. I do think it is, like, I would be fine kind of giving them the excuse of everyone's on break, because it is a break. It is technically a break, you know? Except that I feel like LCS has this problem, and this is like an extreme isolated instance of it, where they do like a kind of a less than ideal job of promoting their products historically. I do think it's gotten better, but definitely one of those things where LCS promotion is a little strange, like no broadcast deals. Anyway, etc. So yeah. But anyway, we can pretend that the break didn't happen, because in an ideal world, there wouldn't be a break. And also, we didn't have a show. So if there's no making the rounds, is there really league anyway?
Was there really LCS?
So yeah, all the other leagues that were happening during this time didn't actually happen either because making the rounds wasn't on. But yes, anyway, LCS will be coming back. I feel like every time I stream, people ask about Shopify Rebellion, which is a very strange team for people to like. But it also makes sense because probably I have a lot of NACL interested crossovers, more so than other audiences. So it makes sense that people would care about Shopify Rebellion because they were basically disguised last year. Even more so until the Boogie return. So let's ask you, because I just published a video about it. Is there any hope for SR fans? And like, what's your take on Boogie starting for them going into this week?
So is there hope? Yes and no. I think so. If you want like any sort of hope in terms of, okay, what are bright spots that we can look at based on Shopify's kind of miserable start and also Boogie's performance with the team previously. I watched their video describing the swap. They did not seem particularly confident in making the change. They just seemed to think that they needed a change. And sometimes that is the case, right? Like, it's not Tomio's fault that the team is struggling, but they need to do something, and they have Boogie on the sidelines. And previously, he has been an occasional bright spot for this roster, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you look at his overall jungle style, if you look at, it's pretty interesting. And I'm not saying this to say like Boogie is good or Boogie is bad, and I'm prefacing everything because I'm going to use statistics. And I always hate when people take statistics like that. I'm just using these to showcase what kind of jungler Boogie is. He still has, if you combine spring and summer, second highest forward percentage of any jungler. He also has the highest team proximity at 14 of any jungler, and the second highest counter jungle percentage. And so what that tells me, in addition to just watching Boogie, is that he really likes to invade. He will try to interact with his lanes when possible. And maybe the team needs that. I think if there's another like bright spot you're gonna look at, or like, oh, maybe we can have hope. It's that Boogie
hope is on anyone's legend. They can't have hope.
Oh, my poor AL team got bonked last night. But anyway, I like AL; they're fun. I think the other thing to look at is the current jungle meta right now, and it's pretty interesting. Obviously, we're on 14-14, so some things could change because some of the AP junglers have been adjusted. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure if those changes are enough to change the meta completely, even with the combined AD changes. But I think if there's another bright spot to look at with Boogie coming in, it's that they were already playing this kind of AP jungle style with him previously. It wasn't necessarily always with AD mids. It was with stuff like Sion and Garen. But Boogie was playing, the brand, the Talia jungle, the Lilia already. And so if there's like something that maybe could give you hope, it's that theoretically, maybe Boogie will be better if the meta stays kind of similar to what it's been for the first 3 weeks. We'll see, because I think, even though I don't think Brand is going to be like eradicated, I think he's actually still going to be pretty good based on 14-14 changes. I think some of the AD adjustments might make it so that other champions could come into mid and that could also shift. But I think if you're looking at this and you're like, not only do we need a change, but maybe this can work out for us, you do look at the fact that Boogie was comfortable on a lot of these AP champions seemingly before it was cool at the start of summer. So he could theoretically fit the meta better.
I actually hate that narrative because Tomio's most played champs are historically are like Nidalee Lulia. So yes, he played like a shit ton of Sejuani Maokai in NACL, but also like all time, if you watch like Tomio's stream, you would see a lot of like Nidalee, Lilia, like these types of champions that he would play. And like he was more of a farming style juggler, right? And I think that's consistent with how he's playing. If you watch the games, but I've seen a lot of people with the take saying like Tomio isn't a carry, right? Like, so they're bringing back Boogie because he's a carry. When I actually felt like the calling card of Boogie was that he gives up a shit ton of his own farm to like give pressure to lanes, right? So
I agree with that.
yeah.
I just think based on like the champions he played in spring, you could look at it like that. But yeah. I am not saying the alternative because theoretically Tomio should also suit this meta.
Yeah.
And I agree with you what you're saying, and that's why I wanted to bring up the forward and team proximity stuff stats, because I do think
and I agree.
Boogie invades a lot and he plays very forward, but he also wants to interact with this lane.
Yeah, I just remember it was like sometimes so frustrating to play against Boogie for junglers. Like if you talk to any junglers, and not because junglers like hate playing against him and feel like he has like insane pressure, it's because their laners are dumb. And they die to really terrible Boogie ganks. So junglers get like really mad because they're watching and they're like, but he shouldn't do this because he'll be so behind if it doesn't work and you're just dying. Right? Like stuff like this. So Boogie is very frustrating to play against for junglers because laners don't understand jungle. And Boogie takes advantage of the fact that laners don't understand jungle very frequently. So in my experience, that is something that Shopify got a lot of superficial wins off of because their laners in like isolated matchups are not like the most insane, and a lot of times they don't pick for laning matchups anyway. So it's like partially a draft problem, partially a laning problem. And also partially, I kind of agree with the overall narrative that the team has no sense of direction.
Oh yeah,
because it also sucks because the sample size is like they played against TL and C9, who they should get trounced by. Like you can't tell me they shouldn't get trounced by these teams, and they played against IMT, right? So their sample size of games that you can actually like analyze is like a 2-game series. And it's like, all right, in this series, yes, their mid game looks completely atrocious. The other two series, we can't really look at their mid game because they're getting invaded. The early game jungle plans that they're making are terrible. Like, yes, we're getting invaded, and we're not like split mapping, and we're split mapping on the wrong side when we have prio top, and our bot lane is still losing. Despite the fact that we're split mapping bot. What is happening? And then we get into mid game, and Shopify consistently make these plays where they rotate from bot and collapse mid, which is like a very, very normal play. Like I can't call it a Shopify play because it's just how you play fucking League of Legends sometimes. You use side prio and collapse mid. And they're just not even pushing out bot wave in mid game versus IMT, right? So they have no, like, even if the play goes well, in theory, they can't get anything out of it. Whereas if you look at some of their spring games, at least they're pushing out their sides, you know? So it's like just so hard to make a comparison. But if you do make a comparison, then yes, SR do look like they have no direction in mid game. But their early game is like either Boogie's gonna hold it up on a string by doing cheese ganks, which is not suited to the meta because he'll fall behind, like him falling behind
Yeah,
enemy
he's gonna
jungle
fall way too
XP.
far behind.
Like even if the champions aren't being played, like the AP junglers aren't being played, which I'm skeptical of, you'll still have the issue that jungle XP is more impactful, right? Um, so yeah, that's I guess like that's my take on the situation. Is it's like yeah, it'll give some direction, but it won't necessarily fix the core issue, which is that the laners don't really support the jungle well.
Subscribe to
And they
twitch.tv
rely
slash
on
Karen
the
Moser, and you can
jungler to
enjoy all
support
the
the
Kelsey
laners.
Moser LPL content
So,
you could ever
yeah.
want. Subscribe now, twitch.tv slash Karen
Weird
Moser.
to because that IMT series is also, and again, this is not something we didn't see in other regions already by this time, specifically LPL
Yeah.
on 14-12. But that was the draft where, especially in the second one, I believe they R5'd Nidalee and they had left Skarner up and all this other stuff where sometimes a draft like that is already going to be very difficult to play. Another thing I do want to bring up about Shopify specifically is as good as I think B-Boy is. I remember you and I had this conversation about like traditional AD carry play, which is like very B-Boy, versus like being a lot more flexible and being able to do things like Senna, right? And like what does Senna bring to the table? They refuse to play Senna. They will ban it every single time. And I think that's another thing where like they seem to be really inflexible in a few of their play styles, and I assume that comes from players and just like player comfort. But I also think it means that in a meta like this where draft has typically been okay, AD mid, AP jungle, and then we're going to take a look at how the side lanes kind of match into each other, and that's going to be the deciding factor of like how our composition is going to work. I think they've been a bit more inflexible in that regard as opposed to other teams, especially when it comes to being able to branch out and play like a Senna composition.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I also think like to your point that some of the drafts are just we have multiple losing lanes and we're supposed to play like jungle invades or we're playing like ganking junglers. There's actually even if you like I couldn't find it in the actual episode of the pros, but it's like either an outtake that's only on Instagram or I just am really bad at skimming the pros episode. But there's a sequence where Tomio said, where Raz asks Tomio, like, okay, how was that, playing your first LCS series? And he said, it was fun until we were getting destroyed. And then he said, and then like some of that game, I was just, some of that game, I was like, oh, I guess we're just hoping for a miracle. Like, especially game 2, we picked Nidalee and... he basically just said like this game is unplayable, right? So like the players are even saying like it's unplayable to an extent. The situation that they're in with the drafts, and I don't know if this is like a champion pool limitation or, I mean, I had a lot of issues with the drafting that Shopify had last year as well, or last split as well. So yeah, we'll see, I guess. But yeah, TLDR, I don't think Boogie makes them like suddenly a good team. Maybe they get a couple of superficial wins. Also, yeah, I don't know. I feel like that change is very knee jerk unless the team atmosphere is kind of imploding because you literally played two of the strongest teams in the league.
Best. Yeah.
And
had a really terrible draft against IMT.
And had really bad drafts against IMT, and I mean, I agree. The team is directionless, though. So, like, if that is consistent in scrims, then that's consistent in scrims. If Boogie is, like, helping them in scrims also people die a lot more to cheese ganks in scrims. That's what I'm saying. Not on stage.
I also think, like, another thing to point out, because I agree with everything you said regarding Boogie and Tomio, is that, like, it's not going to help if you are drafting losing lanes and Boogie wants to do what he does. And like, if you look at why someone like Boogie, who is like a major invader, is going to not get away with some of these things when a jungler like might, is because his lanes are winning and they are pushing, and he plays around that pressure a lot better. And so sometimes Boogie does not have that pressure, but he invades anyway. And sometimes it works, like you said, because laners don't always pay attention. But if they are paying attention, it's not going to work because you won't have that pressure to play around. So that'll be something to watch out for too.
Yeah, it'll be for sure interesting, because I would say that, like, the other thing is, if you are drafting multiple losing lanes and you are playing scaling, actually more experienced junglers will perform way better. That is another thing to note in, like, losing lane drafts, because they understand, like, okay, I have to make a cheese gank here, or I have to make, like, an invade on this timing. The window where I can invade is much more narrow, because, like, they're on base or something like this, right? The window where I can pull grubs is much more narrow, and so more experienced junglers will be able to recognize those. So if we are, like, saying no, these drafts are good internally, then, like, Boogie is the answer if we're gonna stick with the way that we've been playing, right? Is a better answer, but at the same time, it's just, like, it's weird. I don't want to blame it all on drafts, because, again, I think we're like just playing bad in general. Like, everyone is playing pretty bad. And the comment I made, where they actually set up plays that they made in the IMT draft, like, in the IMT games, way better, like, in spring, right, than they did now. So there's also still mid game considerations. So yeah, there's a lot. It is definitely a thing. But
I will watch your video on it.
Oh God, it's terrible because I'm just recording videos at the end of streaming, like, LPL series, and I sound just, like, so over it. I need to work on my energy and presentation in those videos.
Oh my God.
Anyway, speaking of weird things that happened recently in LCS, what happened to Big Dig Summer, Emily? Is it just over? Did it end already? What happened?
Was it? It was on this week's pros, right? Where Sven calls this week their scheduled loss against Team Liquid. So I think this Dig team is really fun. You and I have kind of talked about how, like, our expectations for their performance were maybe not as high as the community were for this team. I think the 100 Thieves win was very interesting in the moment, considering we weren't really sure where 100 Thieves were at the time, and they had just come off of, like, stomping NRG into the ground in week 1. But I also think, to the point you made the last time we recorded this, is like, if you're looking at those two series, they took the one game off of C9, lost that series. They beat 100 Thieves, and then they got absolutely slammed by FlyQuest. And that's kind of what, if you look at, like, at least my expectations for the team, none of these performances are, like, super shocking. I think the big thing, the good and bad about the whole scrim narrative, just because if you're wondering, just more broadly, and I'm talking to the audience and not you, Kelsey, because you already know this, why we bring up scrims, because teams bring up scrims so much, it's because that's where teams see each other the most. And so whenever I ask a player about literally anything, they pull from scrims, I would say 99% of the time. Which is why the fact that Dig were doing so poorly in scrims was like funny haha, but also like funny uh-oh, because you don't know, like this is a really experienced group, right? So they will be able to theoretically take like, you know, wins from that. They will perform better on the LCS stage. I think that's true even in their like on stage losses, based on what I've heard from some of their scrims. I also know that FlyQuest was the team that, and again, this is all before the break, but FlyQuest was the team that they called out, the Dig players called out whenever I talked to them about like, FlyQuest is actually the one that gives us the most trouble. We have the most trouble with FlyQuest. We do not match up well against them. So none of this stuff is unexpected, but I think I'll be really curious to see what they say about their practice over the break, because if they're still struggling as poorly as they did in scrims, that's going to be kind of rough, especially going up against TL this week, who have just looked like in their games, they have a much better understanding. Like even with some of their, like TL is at a point now where I think people are looking at them and they're like, you are NA's best team. It's kind of like the G2 problem where we're judging them on a little bit of a different level. So like, do I think they were peerless in their 100 Thieves win? No. But do I still think they look better than Dig in terms of like their map understanding? Like, absolutely. So I think to win this series, Dig is going to have like leveled up a lot over the break. And I'm not sure if that will happen. But yeah, I don't think, to return to the original question, is Dig season dead? I think they'll end up being fine. Like, I think they'll be a playoff team. But I think it's going to be hard for them to crack into that, like, TL, FlyQuest, C9 block. Because right now they just don't look as coordinated. And they haven't played the map as well as those other teams, or they haven't like laned and pushed their advantages as well as those other teams. I'm specifically thinking of C9 when I said that.
It is crazy to me that I keep thinking like the sample size is so small, right? Like the season's like barely started. There's literally like only slightly more than half.
I know, it's so bad.
It's a single round robin. You play once a week. It's actually crazy.
Oh,
But this is like my main argument against single round robin BO3 is that it's like, yes, BO3 is technically more games because the chances that every series is 2-0 is like approaching 0, but also it like how you are mentally on the day matters a lot. So it's like the fact that you are playing an extended series doesn't mean we're gonna get it feels like we're going to get a sample of a team 7 times as opposed to a sample of a team 14 times, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's why it like feels worse to me, even though yes, I do think we are actually getting a better read on where these teams stack up because of the BO3 than with the BO1. Like I 100% agree with that. I think we're getting like way less random like one-off cheese wins that make the standings feel crazy and parity feel really high. And like it feels like the teams who are winning are the teams that should be winning, but it also feels like the sample of like flavors of the team we're getting is based off of like their scrims that week, how they are in the day, the time slot, all of these things. We're only getting 7 instances of that as opposed to like seeing a bunch of different 14 instances of that. So that is the trade-off, right? So it's very interesting because I keep saying like we'll see how it pans out, like with more games, but it's like they're only gonna play 4 more times anyway. So it's very funny. I do like the thing that is Big Dig Summer is definitely like the narratives that you can draw from this team. Like they're definitely like embracing it. The fact that you have the insight that they say that FlyQuest is their biggest struggle, but they still fully lean into like the content and the promotion for the match, which was excellent. Like all of that,
Yeah, it was really fun.
I think that is what Big Dig Summer is about, like the aura rather than the performance, which I keep saying like teams shouldn't rely on winning every single game to get fans. Like, and I think Dig is a really good example of that. They have so many legacy players and they're actually using that correctly, or like as correctly as an LCS team does. Again, like the bar is very low, but it's still like nice to see. And they're just like so many storylines. I actually wanted to ask you, did anyone bring up the fact that like Sven basically just spent all of the like was it like rookies versus old or like young versus old show match from last year? Do you remember that?
I remember. Yeah.
He basically, when he guest commentated that, he basically spent the entire show match just flaming Jensen. Has anyone brought that up to him? I'm trying to remember.
No, we absolutely should have though, because I remember like he was talking about specifically Jensen's like Starbucks order.
Yeah, and how he
and like all this other stuff. Yeah.
So
I mean, he's also said that about Jensen. The scrim thing, he said that about Jensen like recently, even in the lead up to the FlyQuest match.
Very funny because apparently all of Jensen's teammates just flame him openly. Anyway, because we had the Jensen inspired beef hash out, and then we had the Sven Jan beef hash out, and clearly what we need is the Sven Jensen beef hash out. So,
this Svensson beef.
But it's just funny. He just like threw so many shots, and I'm thinking like, with the inspired drama and everything, does anyone remember that?
I do.
That was amazing. But yeah. It was definitely entertaining, right? So, like, for sure, like, that's the kind of stuff. When I think of Big Dig Summer, I think of Content Machine, and I don't think of, like, we're gonna do well, So, yeah.
I think they'll finish, like, solid mid, potentially fourth behind those 3 teams I already mentioned. Also, another thing to look at is, again, beyond their scheduled loss, as Sven framed it, to DL, they then have Shopify, NRG, and IMT. And like at least 2 of those, potentially 3 of those, depending on how much faith you have in NRG to get their shit together, are going to probably be wins for like Dig. So I think they're going to be fine, and they're probably going to land about as expected.
Yeah, like one thing I've slammed C9 for a bit, or like not slammed, but criticized C9 for a bit, is like their strength of schedule has been so whatever. Whereas like you can kind of flip it on its head for Dig a little bit. Dig have definitely had to play harder opponents than C9, including C9, in kind of the first few weeks, whereas C9 are playing 100 Thieves this week. Woo! And they don't play...
that could be one of our closest matches.
And they don't play TL and Fly until literally the last 2 weeks, so yeah. It's definitely interesting. But yeah, we should talk about other leagues that apparently happened, even though they didn't get the memo that Making the Rounds wasn't on, so league doesn't happen, but it's whatever. LEC, as usual, instead of talking about Fnatic and G2 for the 1 millionth time, Emily and I have decided to talk about KC and MDK for the 1 millionth time, because that's what we know fans want to hear about anyway, is the shit show and the like the last place MSI, you know, that's where the real shit is at. Anyway, I know they're not last place, but yeah.
I want to set up my experience with the MDK BDS series because Kelsey, we were messaging each other a bit over the break, and Kelsey had messaged me as I was taking the train with my mom back from Boston to their house, and she's like, "MDK are back," and I was like, "What is going on?" And I got home in time to see the end of the second game, and I was like, "Okay." And then I watched.
Yeah, the third game was definitely a thing that happened on
Oh
my screen.
God!
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Yeah. MDK are a roller coaster for sure, though.
Wow, that was something.
Yeah.
That I watched, and then I went back and watched game one, and I was like, okay, well, all right.
But yeah, we're actually gonna do a classic making the rounds bit here for MDK versus KCE. Spanish versus the French, kind of.
This is the matchup I feel like people wanted based on just like sheer fan base,
and then just like being able to shitpost. Like you have to value your LEC experience by the amount of shitposting you can do. Like the classics are LEC is bad. Why is LEC bad? LEC is so bad they would lose to NA challengers. Also, like, oh my god, this is atrocious. Holy shit, over and over again. But also, like, just MDK and KC fans throwing things at each other. Anyway, good, enjoyable experiences.
Fight in the audience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's like a whole discourse that we could get into as to whether or not it's good or bad for the scene, but we're just gonna ignore it and we're gonna talk about what you people want because that's what people want is they want the shit posts. So I do think the series is kind of symptomatic of MDK's problem, which is that their bag of tricks is very limited, right? So they came in with like the Braum bot lane and being able to have like a strong level 1 and good timers with like their Braum to actually make things happen in the jungle early game because early game is still what they're best at. But again, within the context of nerf to jungle XP, that kind of early game and playing like with lanes jungle very aggressively, similar to Shopify, which we already talked about. But then it's like once you see the timers that Alvaro's going on, it's like, oh, okay, like this entire team is easy to read, you know? So I think that's like MDK's problem is like you can definitely get the early series wins, but do you have more in your bag after that?
This I think was a problem even when, because like you and I have been big since winter. We were like very pleasantly surprised by MDK and have talked about how MDK is kind of like 100 Thieves is a team that you want to root for because of how they're kind of bringing up rookies from their from whatever system is like feeding into the pro scene. But I also think like the really unfortunate part about it is that the things that we're like, oh man, this team is coming together a lot quicker than expected. I thought it was going to take more time for them to do this. Then they have not improved on a lot of the things that you really need to, especially mid and late. So not only do we have like the problems that you're already addressing with like even within their early to mid, once you learn the kind of predictability of the timers that they're going to be working around, you can respond to that pretty well. You also have the problem of in the mid to late game, their general neutral objective setups haven't really improved all that much. Their team fighting is also very frequently like disjointed and not very well thought out, and their damage dealers are frequently either due to their own mispositioning or the fact that their front line might not be set up, they cannot actually get in to do damage, which is a massive problem, right? If like specifically Supa and Frescowy can't get in to do damage on these like main 80 carries that they play. And you could kind of see that in the BDS series, where you would have moments where like even if they sometimes had a worse setup, it would end up that BDS would play the fight better so that Ice and Nuke could just get in and do more damage. And that whole series was a shit show from both teams.
We got the LAC shit post in. Woo! All right, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think either team comes away with that being like, wow,
we played so good, guys.
We're great. Like, I don't think BDS is coming out of that series like thinking that they did a good job. But I think for Mad, for me, like if we're going to go in traditional making the rounds territory, I think their win conditions and like the things I would like to see from them, obviously just better overall, like mid to late in terms of where they are on the map, their vision control, their neutral objective setups. I feel like I'm just going to list out a ton of things. Their team fighting. It's like, oh, we're great. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. But then I also think the ways that they win are potentially look at what your strengths have been, especially early to mid. Get Elyoya on something where he is going to be affecting his lanes really easily, which could still be tricky on this patch because as far as I know, they're just staying on 14-13 for the entire time, right? So they won't necessarily be contending with the potential of possibly not having to play these like AP farming junglers as opposed to something like even a Talia in jungle, which Elyoya is just going to be a lot more. He's going to affect his lanes a lot more, right? And we've already talked about what kind of jungler he is in terms of like his style of carrying and how he affects his lanes and can affect them early to mid. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for them. I do think one thing that has to improve is just their team fighting. Like if they're going to look at one thing in that giant list, like it really has to be team fighting, because if even one of those fights goes slightly better and they don't make the mistake of like, I'm just seeing that mid lane fight in game 3 over and over again. They had that game. Yeah. They had that game. And so like just make like slightly better decisions around when you're going to be taking fights and be more coordinated. And that will already be like a massive improvement from what we saw.
I'm going to channel like 2014 era Monte Cristo and say, have they considered not fighting? You know, like just don't. Because I feel like they've spent the entire, since spring, they have spent the entire year trying to improve their team fighting, and it is clearly not working. You have a week basically. Just don't.
Just don't fight.
Just hope you roll one of the useless souls. There are a lot of them. Basically, like anything but Cloud and Hex deck is like situationally useless, right? Situationally. It depends on the comps, right? There are situations where it will not be that useful. So just like hope you roll a good situation. Don't fight the dragons. Push top out all the way. Constantly play split. Never put yourself in a situation where you're contesting mid-wave high, because you suck at marking flanks. Like the reason why their team fighting sucks is because they do not mark flanks, and I think that if they don't mark flanks, KC's entire thing is flanking.
Yeah, they're just like, Kana, Targamas, you're wrapping around.
We have no setup on any of our objectives, but we are going in and we are killing them from the side, and MDK will just give it to them.
It's true.
MDK
God,
are
it's
just
so
like
true. I
on
can
their
already see how the
stomachs.
series is gonna go.
They're on their stomachs, like just spreading their cheeks. They're ready. All right. Anyway. Anyway,
Oh my god,
good
that's
times.
so true. Because now I'm looking down because I like wrote down my little wing cons.
Yeah.
What was that? Anyway,
Those are thumbs down, which is appropriate.
it's appropriate for this entire conversation.
Yeah.
Because my wing cons for KC are like Closer and Vladdy mid jungle. I actually think has been pretty good, right? Like Closer has a lane that he can play around. He's always best, I think, when he decides, you know, like I have this one lane. When it was back on 100 Thieves, it was like perma diving bot. But here he's been playing in tandem with Vladdy, which I think is really good. That's a good win condition for them to have. And then also try to hope that some of these flanks end up working and like protect your vision around neutrals, because even in the G2 series, we did see them get some good fights off because G2 didn't ward their flanks, right? When they really should have. And even though they lost, you could be like, okay, well, you know, tighten this up, protect your vision better, potentially drag it out so that like you're not going in immediately. And then G2 can just kind of like wrap you up and then perma destroy you with brand Triss damage. But yeah, and then my last thing is neither team knows what to do mid late.
Yeah.
So I like much like the what series was it that I was casting where I was like, I have confidence in neither of these teams. I think it was NRG, IMT.
Makes sense.
That's how I feel about this series. I'm like, I have zero confidence in either of these teams right now.
I do, but I actually do think like Casey do uniquely kind of counter MDK.
Yes.
Like I actually think stylistically the matchup is really bad for Mad Lions. I think for example, the other thing that BDS was doing, because we were talking about jungle mid, right? Was they were waiting for timers for Alvaro to roam and get vision. And then after they read those timers, they just used the next timer to send support in jungle mid, and Frescoe would basically die or blow flash every time. So it's like also just like targeting mid is also seems to be working well against MDK, and they naturally target mid. They play these flanks like setups really well. They mark zero, and MDK mark 0 flanks usually because they're grading side waves. And I think again, if you just your chances are just way better if you just give Drakes. Just give Drakes. Hope for the best. So yeah.
I'll be looking forward to watching. Or I will watch what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, one sec. I think for some reason my phone is ringing. Be right back.
Hey, chat. What's up? I'm not a very entertaining person when just forced to stand on camera.
I think the problem is I usually wake up at this time after streaming. So my phone is gonna go off. Anyway. Yeah. Everyone everyone seems like everyone's having a good time in Twitch. Excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was making the rounds. MDK versus KC edition. Yay. So let's talk about LPL and LCK, which also LPL barely took a break. Like, barely. They took like 3 days off. So there's been a lot of LPL. But the most important question, given recent events, is whether or not LNG will make Worlds.
Are they the Weibo Gaming of this year, or are Weibo Gaming the Weibo Gaming this year?
I still swear Weibo are bad, but it's fine.
No, I mean, I thought Weibo were bad last year too. Okay,
It's fine. But they did win last night, so
yeah. Rip.
anyone's
AL.
legends are the Dignitas of. Anyone's legend summer is over.
AL are very fun to watch. That's true. Like they're a good time. I think the big thing for LNG that people have already pointed out is that Scout is playing better. Or Scout just looks more comfortable as of late, which is going to make a massive difference. And if you remember, even though Scout and Tarzan both had absolutely terrible performances at Worlds last year, Scout was one of the primary reasons that they were able to get to Worlds, because he was playing so well. And like LNG were kind of a sneaky team where people, myself included, were expecting them to not look as bad as they did. I wasn't expecting them to win Worlds, but I also wasn't expecting them to kind of like fold like they did. Are LNG going to Worlds? I have zero confidence in this team still, sadly. And I don't know if that's just my own like biases or from what I am seeing. Because I want to review the BLG match from last night, because I think in facing BLG, they had a pretty good like read on what you want to do against BLG. I really liked how they focused on like really diving bot, taking advantage of the fact that Elk and On really aren't going to play safely ever. And so I liked seeing that out of them, because it seemed like they had really good understanding of like, we have studied this team and like we know how to beat them. So that was also good. Again, I have to review the series because I only watched it once and I was kind of falling asleep. But yeah, I mean, I still, even with BLG's obvious like strengths and weaknesses, and I don't think any of it is new by any means, I still think BLG TES, even though TES haven't looked all that great, they still have the same strengths and weaknesses as well. Yeah, BLG TES and then
will continue until they win Worlds.
It will. This is a blazing TES zone.
How about that win over Wave? Anyway.
Oh my god. TES makes me sad. Like,
yeah. I mean, I will say I think LNG actually had good game plans going into both the series against BLG and the series against TES that they won. I think that actually LNG had a very similar game plan to TES versus BLG. Both of them had a similar approach playing as BLG, but LNG actually executed it better because TS just didn't adopt their plan, and I also think TS are more limited in their mid pool, which is a problem. But and they also kept blinding Azir versus Knight, which it's like if there's one champion in the meta that Knight can pick into, it's Azir, and Scout played Azir as well, but the bans were like very targeted in order to allow him to pick his ear, so it was set up better. Excuse me. So I think the generally speaking, like they went for playing aggressively versus the solo lanes, and then having an AD carry that can clear bot wave very easily, so that you don't get those. So like Kaisa has a Q that clears bot wave very easily, and MF like obviously has her ult. So I think that they went for those plays, and then they focused on like targeting the solos, which I think is kind of how you have to play against BLG, because BLG will try to split map bot via mid prio and dive over and over and snowball their lead like this. So I think their game plan was very good based on draft. And then versus TES, TES they basically just had winning solo lanes. Like literally, it was that simple. Like just pick winning solo lanes. So I think versus teams where they can pick like winning solo lanes, they'll do well. I think versus BLG, it wasn't consistently that they just had winning solo lanes, because they also played like more volatile matchups, but versus TES they basically consistently just had winning solos, which I think is a good plan. Yeah, and then they played through sides really well. If TES can't play through sides, they lose like most of their advantage over other LPL teams. So they had like Ryze Yone versus TS, which was like very smart. Yeah, so I actually think that their setup versus those teams are good, but they might match up comparatively better versus teams where they can basically flex like good solo lane matchups. I also think the meta is like way better for Scout now, especially if they're willing to do like the Rise flex potentially. Like that was always a classic pick for Scouts. So yeah, I don't know if LNG will make worlds, because like you, I don't trust them. Like my problem with LNG is, I swear every time that I would say okay, this team has like no fight in them, they're just gonna do nothing and roll over and die, then they would suddenly come out of the gate and have like a really good early game plan and snowball really hard. And then other times they would say like, oh, like they improved, and then they would go back to just rolling over and doing nothing and dying. So I don't know, it's very hard for me to, and I tried to find like consistencies in what they would draft, because I initially started out with a narrative of like they have a really strong level 1 jungle that do well. But that didn't always work, so yeah, I couldn't find like consistent reasons for why. It must just be vibes, LNG are like the ultimate vibes team, so
They feeling it.
if the vibes are good, they'll make worlds. That's my answer.
It's not a bad meta for Gala either, I don't think. Which is another like not that they're like insanely, it's not like they're insanely reliant on Gala to do well either, but whenever he is in a meta that he's super comfortable with, he's always going to be a really annoying problem.
Do you know what the worst number in the world is, Emily Rand? You're not even gonna guess.
No. There's too many numbers in existence.
It's 12. Do you know why 12 is the worst number in the world?
No.
So that's the number of wins that Kaisa has in LPL regular season. Anyway, sorry.
It's consistent in TES glazing and Kaisa hate.
Pretty much. I just like I think it was actually the KDF series that I was watching, where there was like a Kaisa pick. I can't remember which series it was, but there was a Kaisa pick, and it was Kaisa and Tavares, and I was like, why would you ever do that? What is the reasoning? Do you just want to lose? I think it was Kaisa. I want to say that it was Kaisa Braum versus Donald. I can't remember. No, it wasn't Kaisa Braum. It was a champion.
Really frustrating one, like across the board, because I've seen Braum picked in like really good situations, and then I've seen Braum picked in like terrible.
It was
situations.
Kaisa Rel versus Varus Leona, and I was like, okay, so you're basically just gonna lose lane at level 3. Got it. Nice. Sick. Good draft. All right. And it was LCK, so that actually worked. Whereas in LPL, Kaisa will just randomly get 3 kills and win the game. So
Good shit.
nice. Yeah. Speaking of LCK, KDF.
What's up with them?
KDF and anyone's legend, shaking the hands and the fraud meme. Are they both fraud teams? What's happening? Let me know.
For KDF, I think we saw like something really similar from them last split too, right? Where like it felt like initially, I still remember that series they had with DK, where DK just looked like poop and Kwangdong destroyed them with a setting composition, and then in DK's next series they tried to play it and they looked like ass. I think Kwangdong always have like 1 or 2 really good like meta reads or draft reads that really enable, and like I thought maybe this is my KT bias showing ? I actually thought Cuz was a lot better than like people gave him credit for when he was on KT. I thought he took a lot of strays that he kind of didn't deserve from the community. And so when this team is like when Cuz is able to do his thing, I think this team ends up looking really good. But I also think as the season wears on, other teams kind of they are not going to be able to take people by surprise and draft, or they're going to draft something really weird and it's just not going to work. Not only really weird in terms of like, oh, no one is playing this, but also weird in terms of this might not be the best against what is strong in the meta right now. So I always like that they're kind of willing to go for that stuff, but also as the season wears on, I think they run out of answers when teams either have better drafting and more coordinated like game plans, or just better players across the board. So I mean, I think they're the weird thing for Kwangdong for me is like, where are they at in terms of LCK strength right now? Because I think their most recent loss to HLE was like fully expected.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know anyone who is favoring them against that. So like it's kind of a Dignitas angle in a way, or like it's like, okay, this team can punch up occasionally if they have a draft that they really like, if they're playing around Cuz really well, or Cuz is playing around his lanes really well, and he's kind of facilitating their transition from like early game into mid game, and they have good setups. But then once they go up against the top LCK teams, like they're just gonna get shut down. So like I don't think it's a super big surprise that they lost to HLE. They still beat DRX. They lost to Gen G, and that's just like their past 2 weeks, right? And I don't think any of those results are surprising whatsoever.
So basically, you're saying that we've managed to identify the Dignitas in every region. We've got Dignitas, anyone's legend, Kwangdong Freaks, and probably SK Gaming.
Actually, accurate.
So
There's the title for the
There
episode,
you
the
go.
Dignitas of every region. It's
there's a
truly big dig
Dignitas-
summer.
There's a Dignitas in every region. Oh, bless.
Yeah, that's kind of like how I feel about KT as well, where like people are suddenly like, "Oh my god, KT is so good," and it's like if you look at who they faced, no offense to Fear X, right? They 2-1 T1 last night. T1 is looking pretty shaky. That's a whole other topic for next week that we'll talk about, I'm sure. Because I would actually want to do like a really deep dive review into
On
their
T1,
performance before talking about it. But like KT is another team where people are like, "Oh my god, KT are looking so much better," and I'm like, "Are they really?" They faced like Nongshim
but
and Fear X,
you're
and
a KT fan, you know.
they're like fine, like they're very mid. I don't think they're going to be better than mid with this roster.
KT are winning worlds, Emily. Get on the train.
Oh my god. The train of what? Who is saying this?
Oh. Let's just see if, like, one episode we're just gonna make an argument. We're just gonna have an episode where we make an argument for like every team winning worlds, and we'll just like
Oh
go
my
through a
god.
list. That'll be a good time. I will enjoy that.
That would be hilarious.
I will say, on the KDF point though, I think that there is like historically a lot of instances where teams have like a really good read on metas. So they will do well initially, like early on after a new patch or a new season change. I think the classic example for really old people like me is the 2014 Samsung teams where I think history will credit Samsung White with a lot of innovations that should have been attributed to Samsung Blue, because Samsung Blue always had really good reads on patches and how to play the game early, and Samsung White basically were just better at executing things that they learned from Samsung Blue. So it's definitely like one of those where it felt like Kwangdong had like a really early read on how to play jungle in the new season and a lot of these things, but then when other teams figured it out, they literally could just do it better. So
They can do it better with like better players.
Yeah.
No offense, Kwangdong. Like I like a lot of their players. I think some of them are like young, can improve, etc. Like I'm not trying to take away from that, but there are better players in the region that now know how to play those styles.
maybe can use capitalization rules more consistently.
No.
I'm sure that the LCK casters have done a bit on this, but it's like, how do you actually pronounce bull dog? Do you say it like that? Is it, do you have to
No.
like put emphasis on the letters? I don't know. Anyway.
Doo is easy at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Also very easy to meme.
True.
Oh, but yeah, I think. Wow, we actually went through topics quickly.
Yeah.
Um,
We did well this week. I do definitely want to for next week dive into T1 a bit because they're interesting.
yeah, we'll definitely talk about T1 next week. I think. Yeah, obviously we refuse to acknowledge certain things that happened, so.
Didn't watch the games. Like
yeah,
actually, I didn't watch the games.
It's harder to make a comment on more recent T1 form, but next week we'll have more tape to look at. So, yeah, I think that's a good time. But I don't know. I felt like we had a lot to cover, and apparently not. Apparently, leak actually didn't happen when making the Raz doesn't occur. But I will say, in honor of Pride Month, which is now very over, shout out to Miracu for spreading the Belveth Kaisel love, and you just got muted, but I could read your lips. It was beautiful.
Oh god, that's Kurt.
I'm glad that love exists, in fake League
Same.
of Legends fan fictions that she makes based off of Vaporeon copy pasta. Or he makes, excuse me. Nice. All right. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you next week, I believe.